Hey, service leaders, here's what we're going to be talking about this week at church. We're going to continue in the Nehemiah series. Chapter 4 this time, we'll do an introduction. We've been talking about our mission, and we'll remind everyone of 10 by 20. We'll probably reference back to Nehemiah chapter 2, where they decided all the people were rallied by Nehemiah, and they said, yeah, we're going to do it. And then it says, but then people came up against them and opposed them. And so we're going to be talking about opposition to this great vision that we have. A few things we're going to say. First of all, we're going to talk about the obvious threat of the enemy. It's Sanballat in the beginning verses of chapter 4. He was a ruler in Samaria, and he came up against Nehemiah, didn't want them to build. You can go read that for yourself. Nehemiah's response in verses 4 and 5, he first of all calls on God in prayer, and then after that, they continued in the work. And so we're going to talk about this dual response, that we should call on God, remember God's part, but we should also remember our part as well. And we see that same theme later on in verses 7 and 8. Again, more people come up against Nehemiah, and he has the same response. He prayed, but then he set a guard. So it's both things. Like, we call on God, but we're also we're not just gonna sit back and wait for God to do it all. We're still gonna follow through and push forward. Now we're gonna talk. The application for us is, obviously, the enemy, Satan, is not happy about us wanting to reach 10,000 people by 2020. And so we're going to talk about the fact that the obvious threat is this is a spiritual battle, and that we need to be ready for that our fight is not against flesh and blood. We talked about that in our supernatural series last year, but we're going to talk a little bit about that. And so that we have to remember God's part, pray to God. We need to be on our knees for this. And then also we need to still remember our part as well. But then in verses 10 through 12, we're going to talk about the more subtle threat, and this is the threat of negativity. You can go look, and it says there that Judah and the enemies and even the families of some of the people that were building the wall, that they were all coming saying, this is a hopeless cause. You shouldn't even try this. You shouldn't even do it. And that's kind of a more subtle threat, that kind of negative speak, negative words. We've got a lot of people in our lives, maybe even in the church, who are going to come up against us and try to discourage us and try to pull us away from doing what God is calling us to do. And you notice the same response in verse 14. Nehemiah remembered the Lord, and then they fought. They said, let's continue to fight. And so that's the second point. And then the third point is that it's a great little visual at the end of the chapter. Go read it for yourself, starting at verse 16, where they go to do the rebuilding of the wall, and in one hand they basically have a trowel, to build the wall, and in the other hand they have a sword. And I love that picture. And we're gonna talk about, okay, our trowel is we looked at this last week. Our trowel is our time, our talent, our treasure. Our trowel is what we're bringing to the table to help people pursue God. So get on a team, be invitational. That's the work toward building the wall. That's the work toward the vision. But then in the other hand, we've got the armor of God. The sword is the armor of God, that we have to still be ready to fight. And we need to encourage people to fight. It's a great visual. Go back and read it for yourself. And then we're going to close with verse 20. And of course, Nehemiah says at the end there, our God will fight for us. And if he doesn't do it, then this thing isn't going to work. So obviously, God's part is the bigger part. And we're going to do our part as well. So hopefully that helps. Let's look forward to an awesome Sunday. We'll see you then.